Hey guys, today let's make my favorite simple royal icing you can make in a minute. I'm also sharing how to ice cookies with it, how to store the icing and ice the cookies, and many other important tips. So let's get started. In a bowl, add powdered sugar and water or milk of your choice. Add milk if you prefer a richer flavor. You'll need more amount of milk than water to get the same consistency. I'll show more details about how each dried icing look different at the end of the video. And add honey or corn syrup of your choice. I often add honey as it's a little bit healthier, but use corn syrup if you want a more neutral flavor. I'll also show the summarized comparison at the end of the video. And simply mix well with the rubber spatula. I don't use a whisk to prevent the icing from containing lots of air bubbles inside. I didn't sift powdered sugar today. I'm just so lazy doing it oftentimes. But when I don't sift it, I don't add all the liquid at once and instead leave a bit of liquid to make a thicker icing first. That is because the lumps gets removed more easily when the icing is thicker. Once you can see it's lumpy and smooth, I add the rest of the liquid. When adding all the liquid at once, some lumps of powdered sugar tend to remain and often get stuck in when piping it. To be most safe, I recommend sifting powdered sugar in advance. To color the icing, I recommend using gel paste food coloring. You can achieve a brighter color with a smaller amount compared to liquid food coloring. So this is a loose royal icing to fill space. To draw a line on the edge, ideally you want a slightly thicker icing. It's possible to draw lines using this loose icing like this, but it spreads a little bit more and it's not ideal, especially when drawing detailed designs. So for that purpose, simply add less liquid, either it's water or milk. As you can see, the consistency is not widely different, it's just slightly thicker. The icing does not come out from a piping bag easily when it's thicker than this. Now outline the edge with the thicker icing. You can draw it nicely by cutting the tip a tiny bit. By creating the dam, the loose filling stays in line and you can create very clean lines. I highly recommend doing this to get a very neat look. Wiggle the filling with the toothpick and fill the gap within the line. When doing that, be careful not to scratch the surface of the cookie too much to prevent the crumb from going in the icing. If you have a time, let the line dry completely before filling the space with the loose icing. When I don't have a time though, I fill the space right away and it still works. Just be careful not to scrape off the lines with the toothpick. When attaching sprinkles or adding more icing and letting it flatten, always do so right after the icing is filled before it starts getting dry. You also want to finish icing one cookie at a time as the surface of the icing forms a thin sugar layer quickly. Also ensure that the icing is not warm when frosting and is completely cooled, as the warm cookie can cause the icing to spread too much or leaving the spots of melted butter fat. I love this icing because it's so easy to make, but also because it flows nicely and is easier to pipe than any other royal icing that I have used. That is because the corn syrup or honey prevents the sugar from crystallizing or drying out too fast. They also contribute to a slightly shinier surface than more traditional royal icing recipes. That being said, the icing still starts drying in minutes when leaving it in the bowl, so transfer it into a piping bag or airtight container right away once it's made. Once they are iced, wait for 12 to 24 hours for them to fully set. The time depends on the humidity in the room, but wait for a full day to ensure they are completely dried. The iced sugar cookies take a good amount of time to make, but they are so pretty and I love that you can create any design using any color. Share cute iced sugar cookies during holidays, at New Year's event, Valentine's Day, Easter, birthdays, and so many more fun events. Store the icing in a airtight container. One batch of the recipe fills 1 cup container. You can store it at room temperature in the refrigerator or in the freezer. I did a quick test to compare how each icing looked after being stored for 5 days. As you can see, the icing stored at room temperature was separated. The liquid was on the surface and some sugar sunk to the bottom. So mix well before using it and add more liquid if needed to adjust the consistency. When it's stored in the refrigerator, it's slightly separated but not too bad at all. And this was stored in the freezer and completely defrosted at room temperature for hours. You can see it's not separated at all. I didn't even need to mix well. So I recommend storing the icing in the freezer when you are not using it within a day or about 24 hours. To store the iced cookies, bag each of them in a plastic bag. Seal it completely and place them in a airtight container. Store them at room temperature once the cookies are iced, not too cold or warm, a cooling room temperature. Avoid any direct sunlight. I did tests to compare the results. These cookies were stored at room temperature. The icing looked the same and was not damaged. These were stored in the refrigerator. As you can see, they've got spots on the surface, so do not store iced cookies in the refrigerator. And these were stored in the freezer. This time I got the spots on the surface, but I have to say oftentimes like this time and this time, the cookies look the same after freezing and thawing. There are some possible reasons why this happened, like the room temperature or humidity, as I left the cookies unbagged more than a day, I think, as I was filming at the same time. So it's not common, but it can happen under some circumstances. So I would say it's always safe not to store in the freezer unless it's necessary. When storing iced cookies in the freezer though, do not open the lid right away and leave the container at the room temperature until the cookies are not cold at all to avoid any damage on the icing. For the base cookies, you can use any cutout cookies. I used my favorite sugar cookie recipe this time. I'll leave the link below in case you want to give it a try. When using milk, the icing looks slightly more white or pastel and matte. It tastes slightly richer. When using water instead of milk, the icing looks slightly less white, a little bit shinier like a sheer matte, and the shelf life gets much longer. And when using corn syrup instead of honey, you don't see much difference in the look, but the flavor gets more neutral. With honey, you can taste a subtle honey flavor. I'll leave the amounts of all the ingredients in the description. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy pastry living, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.